Hello, my name is Rosario Mawby and I am the Deputy Programme Leader for the BMUS Popular Music Performance degree at the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance. I am a lecturer in performance, musicology and voice, as well as a professional singer and musical director. My presentation is an exploration of Entwistle's learning typologies in application to popular music vocal assessment in higher education. To give context, this particular thread of exploration was extracted from a section of my MPhil thesis which looked at the issues and challenges in the assessment of popular music performance within the UK HE music sector. Whilst the thesis looked to explore the challenges that arose from popular music performance assessment, the theory regarding learning types was researched in order to understand how students learn and therefore how did they prepare for performance assessment. Since writing about assessment in this way, I wanted to extract some of the learning and apply the information in a practical way whilst exploring the typologies found in further detail. Entwistle's research into learning typologies highlights 4 types of learners. These approaches are categorised as follows: deep, surface, strategic, and apathetic. The deep approach is characterised by the student who wants to learn and will utilise and apply what they have learned in other areas, including assessment. The student who is a deep learner is described by Entwistle as the model student. Deep approach learning is associated with the term deeper learning, a method that tutors aspire to deliver within their course content, according to Entwistle. The surface approach is a student who fears failure, so applies the technique of memorising the information they are given. Whilst memorisation is a useful skill, it does not embed learning. The results of memorisation for some forms of assessment can be successful. Examples of this would be where a music student would memorise previous answers from a mock paper and emulate these in their next exam. However, if information is not retained or not memorised by the student, then failure will ensue. The strategic approach is a student who wants to succeed, but does so by finding what makes good grades. Essentially, the student aims to work the system. The strategic learner, much like the surface learner, is unable to apply their learning elsewhere as their main focus is attaining the best mark possible. The apathetic approach is a learner who drifts into higher education. They do not engage with their education, but they also have a personality type that indicates a general lack of interest. I have attempted to apply this theory specifically to popular music vocal students and try to identify these learning types with particular traits that students have demonstrated within a HE environment. Using Entwistle's breakdown of these learning typologies, I have highlighted the following traits. The deep approach is considered to have a depth of vocal knowledge. They have the ability to transfer their knowledge across genres whilst having an emotional understanding of the repertoire they deliver. They connect technique with performance and they adapt their learning fluidly to the assessment requirements. The surface approach is a student who is resistant to risk and will work systematically through their work. The resistance to risk prevents them from developing, and unlike Entwistle's learner typology, the ability to memorise technical ability is not so easily applied. The resistance here is the learner's fear of failure and therefore averts assessment altogether, demonstrating a lack of vocal knowledge. An example of this would be if a singer was to approach a difficult note that required the belt vocal quality. The fear and resistance would be to not sing the note required in this quality, but to either sing the note with variation, so changing pitch or changing the melodic line completely, or by singing this note in a different vocal quality, for example substituting belt for twang quality, in order to successfully complete the passage. The strategic approach is a student who succeeds by seeking direct feedback orientated around assessment requirements. They are selective with their repertoire in order to highlight their strengths and strategically choose to not challenge themselves by taking on difficult material. Strategic and surface approach learners are relatively alike when it comes to a fear of failure. However, strategic learners strategically avoid failure and it is therefore a choice, whereas surface approach learners have an embedded fear of failure. The apathetic approach is a learner who is disinterested in singing. There is no desire to improve and ultimately is a passive learner. The student relies purely on their own abilities and is non-responsive to the lecturer's feedback. Their traits and characteristics in turn impact their performance assessment preparation. The students focus on different areas of the assessment, and this is reflected in the way they learn and receive or ask for information. There are, of course, differences in the way both one-to-one and group study teaching is approached. The advantage to teaching one-to-one is the individual feedback that can be given to tailor an individual's needs, as well as being able to truly focus on that particular student. The disadvantage to teaching one-to-one is the lack of applying this theory to others. That does not mean to say flipped learning does not occur, but the depth of knowledge can be limited in this way. Group study benefits from skills such as collaboration, as well as learning from and with other learner types. There is the disadvantage, though, of a lack of individual feedback. This highlights some challenges in adapting the environment for specific learners, especially in a group study environment. Therefore, the questions posed, addressed in my abstract, will focus around popular music vocalists in a group study context within HE. Our aim, though, is to encourage all learners to work towards a deeper sense of learning, regardless of discipline. But what do we do in the meantime? In order to support popular music vocalists, first of all, we could openly discuss with them the ways in which they learn. It may seem an obvious action to make, but individual needs can be lost within the context of group study, as the time constraints of moving through many bands in quick succession can impact the feedback delivered. Helping them to recognise their learning typology will give them a platform of understanding their practice. The skills we look to develop in HE learners should be applied here, even within focused learning. This does bring up its own challenges when the scale of students we see in higher education is possibly greater than other educational settings, such as high school and further education. We can, however, approach their learning styles with specific methods of teaching in order to develop and enhance the student experience without involving the student directly. Recognising the type of learner that is in front of you will only enhance the student's educational journey. Catering for the students' needs, we could work on the environment we provide for these particular types of students. Surface approach learners clearly need a safe environment to take risks within. A vocalist needs to be comfortable in a space in order to overcome their fear of failure and be less resistant to risk. Reinforcing this will help those learners to relax and to understand that failure is nothing to be feared of. Allowing students to see your mistakes and talking about prior experiences of perceived failure will also put this particular type of student at ease. Where there are deep learners, they should be encouraged to work alongside strategic learners. This would encourage the learning experience of the strategic approach by working alongside a student that has a meaningful approach to learning. The mindset of a strategic learner is the closest in mindset to the deep learner approach. They have, in essence, the right toolkit to provide themselves a more valuable educational journey through their discovery of learning for the skills learned as opposed to the grade at the end. It is important to note that a deep learning approach will naturally encourage better grades, but does not necessarily mean these are the top graded students, as the assessment is not their goal, but the learning from the assessment. In identifying deep approach learners, this should be taken on board. The difficulty in enhancing the apathetic learner is truly understanding what they are interested in. In the field of music, we find ourselves teaching students in HE who have drifted into higher education and they are not there for the education but possibly the external student experience. These students are a challenge and may not have the fitness of study required for higher education. However, this does not write off apathetic learners. Finding what interests the apathetic learner and working towards a joint goal can help a student achieve their full potential. An example of this would be where I recently worked with a second-year vocalist who demonstrated the traits portrayed was that this particular student was not disinterested in singing, but was in fact not actually interested in singing covers. It was through a discussion that they were more interested in singing their own songs. This student was then able to openly discuss why they were seemingly uninterested and why they had appeared to have no desire to learn. They were learning the wrong type of material. We were able to work towards transferring the student to the songwriting program in order to develop that person further. They are now engaged with the program and working towards completing their studies in order to progress to another program within the institution. All three questions point towards this idea of being adaptable as lecturers, as well as being flexible. In a recent performance module with my vocal students, I created a specific vocal debrief session in order to address my students' needs, as well as enhancing their student experience. I had acknowledged that the individual feedback after each performance, perhaps lasting only 2 to 3 minutes, for some was not enough. It was difficult to tailor the experience to each individual learner from a group context. The structure of the session was a half-an-hour verbal discussion that took place directly after the performance workshop. The session had approximately 10 students per group, but this could have easily incorporated larger numbers of students. Facilitating this class was formed on the basis of engagement through partnership. Questions asked to frame discussion would look at the themes such as performance, technique, style, and general professional musicianship. These questions would look to discuss, but not all-encompassing, how do you feel the performance went? How can we engage in the performance better? What were the key stylistic techniques that we needed for this particular genre? Is there anything as a group we can develop together? This might lead to other questions, for example, as how might we develop this further? And what can we do to improve our practice? What went well? What were you most proud of? Did anyone inspire you and why? And what are the takeaways from today's session? The design of this debrief session was also to allow for the students to hear general feedback that we could share together, but also allow for individual feedback to be asked for as well as shared. The environment allowed deep, strategic, and surface learners to work together and take on different elements from these sessions. Initially, some of the apathetic learners did not attend these optional sessions, but over time they came via the encouragement of the surface approach learners who saw the value of the learning created. It also inadvertently helped their understanding of the learning outcome where they needed to demonstrate evidence of reflection on performance in a group context through offering and implementing feedback given. As a recent addition to this presentation, the students from the performance module had a redesigned assessment brief. Within the portfolio was the inclusion of a video journal requiring an analysis of their performances as well as discussing the feedback implemented within the year. It has been a successful addition where students now look to implement this in their learning. The learning typologies most successful of this element of the project was those who were deemed to be deeper learners. They were able to analyse their learning in a deep and meaningful way. The strategic learners saw this element as a box-ticking exercise, and both surface and apathetic learners did not engage, mainly due to fear of failure and indifference. Interestingly, the learner types reflected their typology within assessment too. I look to include the vocal debrief in the curriculum for performance next year and timetabling these sessions in as live performance feedback. We also hope to use this method across the other instrument disciplines to see if this has as much success from removing feedback in a performance class to its own individual space. This has not cost much in the additional delivery, but the impact it has had outweighs the cost. It is also something that will easily transition to online delivery and means that all vocalists from a singular year group can be included in the discussion of live performance feedback to enhance their learning. Through the application and exploration of Entwistle's learning typologies and other learning examples since, categorization is resembled by fitting a student in a box. Diagrams reflect this also. However, my experience with my vocal students, and with other students too, is that these students move on a sliding scale. The implied hierarchy of surface to strategic I feel is better viewed the other way around, and that the strategic learner in fact has a fuller toolkit to bridge the gap between their learning type and that of a deeper sense of learning. The main change from a strategic learner is their mindset. Once they shift their thoughts from learning for assessment to assessment for learning, the student will finally achieve this. The deep learning of a vocalist is equally demonstrated in popular music performance for those who are versatile and reflect the adaptability and flexibility required from their tutors too. The sliding scale also indicates that a combination of learner typology can exist, but with the relative learning type next to it. I have yet to meet a deep apathetic learner. Thank you for listening.